Now, here's an example of how precedents will change the rental level. This is Bond Street, between 1987 and 2010. You can see that in 1987 it's £20 a square foot, Zone A. And then it went up to 35, and it stayed quite stable actually for those two, for that 10-year period. Then it went up to 55, 65. 2010, somebody came in and paid £98 a square foot. So, the next time there's a rent review in that street, and my wife has one in June, the landlord will say, well, I'm afraid the going rate's £98 a square foot. And in my wife's shop, she's paying 65. So obviously, he's going to ask for an increase, and he's going to have the evidence to prove it. Well, is he? Is he going to have the evidence to prove it? He has a piece of evidence to prove it, and it is quite a convincing piece of evidence. But there may be other shops in that street that have had reviews that show that it's much less. There may be other shops in that street that have had renewals that actually didn't settle for this. So, although this contributes to a precedent, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's set in stone, that it's a done deal. There's still room for negotiation. Now, how do you find the going rate? Sorry, I said that already. You go into the last shop that's had a lease renewal or a review, and you basically ask them what they're paying. Preferably, it shouldn't be more than 9 months old. Preferably, it should be a few months old. Certainly within 6. And obviously, it has to be a comparable property. If you ask your fellow shopkeepers, and they have had a lease renewal, but they don't know what they're paying per square foot, then measure their shop. Ask them if you can measure their shop. And you'd be surprised the number of people that say, yeah, well, that's fine by me, because of course it's within their interest as well to keep that rent down.
We've got a question.
Oh, right, sorry.
Just a very quick question.
Yeah.
I've got a D1, of course. There's no comparable D1s, and I will not allow any more D1s in my street.
Yeah.
So
That's
you
true.
might have to get a professional survey done.
To be honest, I would always recommend that you get professional advice. That's the best advice that you can be given. Get a commercial surveyor and commission them to do your rent review for you. It will cost you money, but it will save you thousands. And they know what they're doing, they speak the language, they have all the evidence at their disposal, they're used to the horse trading, and that would be the best thing that you could do, the best thing you could all do, to be honest. But if you can't afford it, then this will give you an idea of whether what the landlord is asking is ridiculous or whether actually it's more or less right. Now, generally what happens with D1 use where there is no comparable property in the same street, or indeed possibly even the same area, it really is a case of horse trading.
And I created the D1, so I don't want to pay for that.
Yeah.
That's my argument. Because it can revert back to retail.
Well, D1 is less valuable than retail, actually. So your landlord could say, well, you applied for the change of use and you got it. But that's, why is that my problem? Your landlord was foolish to let you do it, to be honest. Because he did let you do it, you've done it. That D1 use now could be passed on to another tenant.
Absolutely.
And D1 is less valuable than A1 or
It's
A2.
only valuable to the tenant,
Yeah.
but not at least.
What is the D1 place?
Oh, sorry. There are different use classes, planning use classes in the planning law. So A1, for instance, is a shop.
Yeah.
A2 is an office. A3 is a restaurant or a cafe, as long as it's got seating over a certain number of covers. D1 is
Medical use, really.
it's a mixture of uses. Yeah. Bingo halls, for instance, are D1. Dance studios are D1. Theatres are D1. And there's a whole series, and then each use class is broken down into even smaller use classes. And generally, offices are A2, and shops are A1, and restaurants are A3.
Okay, thanks.
Move on. So you've got your Zone A rates. Now you need to know which of those is the one that sets the precedent for the street.
Can I just ask you a question first?
Yeah.
Because I've got a double-fronted shop. So is there an argument that they would measure and there's an entrance on both sides?
You've got a return frontage.
Yeah. Well,
So-
no, it's on the corner. It's a corner. And there's an entrance on both sides.
Yeah, you've got what's
So
called...
they measure in from both sides, can they?
No, what they'll do, what they normally do is they'll take the main road,
Right,
or
okay.
the major road, as the front of the shop. But if you've got glass across the front of your shop and then glass down the side,
Yeah.
that's called a return frontage,
Oh, right, okay.
and that's considered to be so valuable that they add 5% onto the cost of your rent.
So I've not asked that question.
No, I keep quiet. Because your return frontage actually goes down Pelhams,
Whitecross Street.
Whitecross Street, which is hardly valuable.
No.
You know, if it was Regent Street and Oxford Street, then you know maybe that would be good to have return frontage on those two, but it's hardly valuable. Right, let's have a look at the when the lease details of these shops then. Right, Jones the Butcher, Diplock, okay, there they all are. There are the lease renewal details or the review details. Which one of those is going to give you a precedent for the street?
At the earliest.
It's your lease, if you like, your lease, the lease of your shop.
Hobbs the Baker.
Right, why?
Most recent. Most recent.
Yeah, because it's the most
Oh,
recent.
I see, from now.
Yeah. So, you know, your lease is going to come up for renewal or review in the next, let's say, month. Which one of those is going to be the best one to look at? Obviously, October 2010 is not that far away, but actually, Hobbs the Baker is brand spanking new at the 1st of January. So let's say that Hobbs the Baker is paying £22,000 a year rent. Right? What's the going rate for the street? So you divide the ITZA into the rent. What was Hobbs the Baker's ITZA? 766 divided into 22,000.
£28.72p.
£28.72p. So, that's the going rate for your street. Now, if you're paying 30 quid already, there's no margin for any increase. And that's what you say to your landlord. I'm sorry, but you know, when your landlord comes and says, well, I want to put your rent up by 20%, and you're already paying £30 a square foot, you just say there's no margin for any increase. If, on the other hand, you're paying £20 a square foot, then you know that you might be looking at an increase of £8 a square foot. Not necessarily, because you could bargain with the horse trade, but that there's evidence there to suggest that that is the going rate. Now, can you see how having this information just puts you in a much stronger position? Because when your landlord comes along and offers to increase your rent by 20%, you've no idea whether that's fair or not. Whereas with this, you do know whether it's fair or not. And you can go back to your landlord and say, I'm sorry, but Hobbs the Baker settled his rent on the 1st of January and he's only paying £28.72 a square foot. You're asking me for £39 a square foot. I'm already paying 30. You're already getting a good deal, Mr. Landlord. £2 more, or just under £2 more than I should be paying. Now, how do you negotiate? When your landlord comes to you and says, right, you're paying 20 grand at the moment, I'll tell you what, been hard times, I'll put your rent up to 25. It should be 30, but I'll put it up to 25. The first thing you ask is, that's very nice of you, thank you very much. Can you tell me what the Zone A rate is? In other words, how much am I paying per square foot for one square foot of Zone A property? And almost certainly your landlord won't know. If he's contracted an agent, the agent will know, but he's probably reluctant to tell you. So that's what you want to know. That's your first piece of information. What is the Zone A rate that you are charging? I'm not interested in, is it £30,000 a year, is it 20? I want to know what the Zone A rate is, because that allows me to compare it to other properties in the street. And then, if he gives you a Zone A rate, the second question you ask is, what properties are you using then? What properties have you got that evidence from? Because if you've got it from Boggs the deli, or Diplock the deli, or anybody other than Hobbs the Baker, then it's probably not valid, it's probably not evidence. And you want to know, when was that lease or that review held? Was it recently? Was it last year? Was it this year? You might find that I had a shop in Oxford and the landlord was quoting a rent from a year ago because it was more favourable. Well, he would, wouldn't he?
Is there any central register of what of these sorts of things now, being optimistic?
No. And the reason why is because individual shopkeepers have rent reviews and lease renewals. They renew them or they review them, and they don't talk to their fellow shopkeepers. They don't tell the traders association. They don't. The only people that know are surveyors.
Right.
But if you go in and ask your fellow shopkeepers or your fellow, your office neighbours, they'll almost certainly tell you.
Mhm.
And even if they don't know, I mean, if you went into most shops and said, what are you paying in terms of Zone A for your rent, they wouldn't know. But if they'll tell you the gross rent, and they'll allow you to measure their shop, then you can get an idea. Now, this will give you an idea that's a rough idea, because obviously you're never going to be as good as a surveyor. But it'll give you a close enough idea for you to know whether this is outrageous, the request, or whether it's actually reasonable.
You say the agent, if he tells you.
Well, the
No
agent,
rate.
the agent acting for the landlord will probably tell you very little other than what rent you expect.
Is he not required to tell you what the...
He's not. He's only if you ask.
Yeah, but when you ask, he
Oh yeah. Yes. If you ask the agent and he declines to tell you, then you know straight away that you've got him over a barrel because he doesn't have the evidence. Otherwise, he quotes it because evidence is evidence, or he has evidence but it doesn't go in his favour. But if it's a good agent, and they should be, they will tell you if you ask the Zone A rate and the evidence, the property that they got it from, and then you can go along to that property and make sure that they're giving you the right information.
I think there might be one public register you can get your information from, is land registry, but that's only if the lease is over 7 years and it has to be registered. And that may be historic.
Yeah, and it's a long shot.
Yeah.
There's no compulsion on anybody to register their rent, to actually make public what rent they're paying. And lots of big businesses won't tell you what rent they're paying. Big chains, it's commercial, confidential, they'll never tell you. But then others will be quite happy to tell you because they don't want to see the rent go up too much either. And remember, what you agree will set the precedent for everybody else.
So if the landlord wants to make an outrageous demand, and you say, I'm not paying that, who's going to buy?
Right. Well, he can't, but we come on to that in a minute.
Okay.